Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today we are finally testing out the new Natasha Denona Eye Sculpt Texture and Tones eyeshadow palettes. These are brand new and officially available on the Natasha Denona website, Beautylish, I believe they're on Ulta Beauty, and Sephora US. But these are, of course, the new Texture and Tone eyeshadow palettes. We have a soft version and a dramatic version. These are retailing for $82 US. And as always, when it comes to Natasha Denona, I'd like to mention that I do have a code that can save you 15% if you're ordering directly off her website. But if you are based in Canada like I am, I do highly recommend Beautylish because then you don't have to worry about shipping fees or duties or anything like that. But these palettes are retailing for $82 US, which is a little bit of a jump. But these are also made in Italy and have a 24-month shelf life, and these are described as the new Midi Plus format, so you're getting 18 shades in each of these. Now the inner packaging is also a little bit different. It is in that typical plastic, but it does feel quite heavy and weighted. But it does feel quite sleek. This is the size in comparison to one of her standard midi palettes. So the size actually isn't that different, but the packaging is really most comparable to the Hyper Natural Face palette in terms of the packaging, the sleekness, but you do still get the little dots on the back so you can pop out the shades if you want to and rearrange them or mix and match them with your other midi palettes because these pan sizes are the midi pan size. It's just that they are much closer together in the palettes. So of course this is what the soft palette looks like. It is very, very pretty. This one is mostly matte with a couple of pops of shimmer. And this is of course supposed to give you softer looks, but you do have one end of the palette that is much deeper where you can really enhance that and go dramatic if you want to. And one thing that is interesting about these palettes is that she has designed them to go with the undertones in her High Glam foundation and concealer line. So in each row we have rosy, peach, yellow, cool, warm, and neutral. And she's done the same thing with the dramatic palette. Now they both are white on the front, but the soft palette has sort of like a rosier sort of backing, and the dramatic has a more brown backing. And the dramatic palette is different from the soft palette because of course it is much deeper. It is designed to better flatter deeper skin tones, which I love that she's done. But this palette has 2 rows of mattes and 1 fully shimmer row. Now both of these palettes have a mix of silky mattes and slip cream mattes. So the slip cream is kind of her updated cream to powder formula, and the shimmers are a mix of metallics and sparkling foiled, which is my favorite shimmer finish that she has. So let's quickly get into the swatches. It was a little tricky for me to figure out how I wanted to do these, but I decided to work with them in terms of their color family row. So in each group of swatches, I have done the columns that they belong to. So let's get into the swatches of the soft palette. R1 is a matte light pastel rose. R2 is a matte dusty rose. R3 is a cream matte vintage rose. P1 is a matte light medium nude. P2 is a matte medium peach nude. P3 is a matte medium dusty peach nude. Y1 is a matte light vanilla. Y2 is a matte light medium dusty sand. Y3 is a cream matte medium earthy brown. C1 is a metallic light icy pearl. C2 is a matte light medium cool nude. C3 is a creamy matte medium cool brown. W1 is a creamy matte medium warm nude. W2 is a creamy matte medium dark brown. W3 is a cream matte coffee bean brown. N1 is a metallic dark neutral brown. N2 is a metallic satin deep brown. And N3 is a cream matte intense black. So a very beautiful color story. We can easily see how this is the softer version, and she has designed it it, like I said, in columns of color stories, and you can work from top to bottom to create your looks. If you're just looking for something very simple, it also goes from lightest to deepest in this direction as well. Okay, next, let's get into the swatches of the Dramatic palette. So this one I am a little bit more excited about just because I think it's so pretty. And once again, I have swatched in terms of their color family. So W1 is a matte medium warm brown. W2 is a sparkling foiled light warm nude. W3 is a matte dark warm brown. Y1 is a matte light honey. Y2 is a metallic medium golden nude. Y3 is a matte medium cool dark nutmeg. R1 is a matte medium neutral nude. R2 is a metallic medium rosewood. R3 is a matte medium dark dusty rosewood. P1 is a matte medium warm caramel. P2 is a sparkling foiled medium copper. P3 is a cream matte medium peachy brown. N1 is a matte dark neutral brown. N2 is a metallic dark neutral brown. N3 is a matte deep brown. C1 is a matte deep black brown. C2 is a sparkling foiled deep purple with multi-chrome sparkles. And C3 is a matte intense black. Now I wanted to mention P1 is in the I Need a Warm palette, and that is the shade Fervor. N3 is in the I Need a Warm palette as the shade Pep. And C3 is in the Mini Eye Sculpt palette. So the Mini Eye Sculpt palette is the one that she came out with back at the beginning of the year, which was just that all matte mini palette that I really love. So I'm excited to sort of expand on this. I did know these larger palettes were coming because I am nosy. So from time to time I do look up the different things that she has trademarked so I can kind of have an idea of what's coming, even if it might be a year or two out. But I did know these were coming. I just had no idea that there was going to be 2 of them. So I'm really excited for this. But let me pin the hair back. I'll zoom you in and we can create 2 different looks with each palette. And then we can look at some comparisons. I will say there's definitely some overlap in the palettes that I use to compare these, but we will get to that in a bit. So let me zoom you in and pin the hair back. All right, so now that I have you zoomed in nice and close, I think we can start with the soft palette. And I'm going to start with the shade R1. This is just a standard matte. I'm just going to kind of use this and set it down all over the lid as a bit of a base for the shadows. I do just have some concealer on my lids and set it down with some powder. I figured I'm just going to be taking these right off anyway, so there's no need to get into a proper primer. Okay, next I'm going to go into R2. I am kind of working in the columns that she sort of set out, but you definitely do not have to do that. You can hop around as much as you want. You can stick to the columns if that makes life easier for you. It is your palette. You can do whatever you want to do. I think both of these palettes do seem to be very well-rounded and well-balanced on their own. But I do think if you do end up getting both, they are great companions because you could easily build a softer base with this one and then go into the deeper palette. I can see myself using maybe R1 as my sort of base and then maybe using a transition out of this palette and then hopping into the Dramatic. I can see myself doing that, but I did purchase both, so I don't mind doing that. I'm not going to say you need to purchase both just for that purpose, but it is of course an option. Going into R3 now, this is in the Slip Cream formula and using this one as that outer corner shade. This is very pretty. I do like her Slip Cream formula much more than the original cream to powder that she had. I liked that formula, but I do feel like the Slip Cream really does correct any issues you may have had. The original cream to powder I felt like could be a little bit difficult to build, difficult to blend sometimes, and could end up being a little bit patchy if you weren't too careful, whereas this really just kind of answers everything. It's a cream, but it essentially transforms into a powder once you start blending it. So it's incredibly easy to work with. And you can see how effortlessly these shades are applying to the eyes, which always makes me super happy. I'm gonna grab a flat brush now and I wanna go into C1. The only thing about this soft palette is I wish there was more shimmers. I love mattes. I love a good all matte palette, but I am, in my heart, a shimmer girl, so I do kind of wish we had a little bit more shimmer options in here, but I could very well be in the minority on that. This is really pretty. I might actually switch to my finger for application just because I always find that her shimmers, they apply well with a brush, but they always apply best with a finger. That is really, really pretty. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into the shade R2 and sort of use this to blend that shimmer into that outer corner pink a little bit better. I'm getting a very, very bridal look here, which I actually do like. This would be such a good bridal palette. I think I'm gonna go into Warm 1 down here, and I just want to use this as a bit of a soft liner. Nothing too crazy. I'm not trying to wing it out too much. Just adding a little bit of definition to the lash line. And this is also a slip cream. The slip cream shades are amazing for liners. Okay, I did get interrupted by a phone call, but I just popped on some mascara, and this is that first super soft look all done. So just a very pinky, very cute. I did do the smallest little liner wing, and I think it just looks so pretty and very, very bridal. I think if I was really going for a bridal look, I may have added this one sort of to that outer corner just to give a little bit more depth. And I do think this is a gorgeous bridal palette though. So I love how this look turned out. It's very, very light, almost like a barely there, but definitely something I would wear regularly. So I really love this. But let's get into look number 2 with this palette. I think I want to see how dramatic we can go. Dramatic for me, but I do want to use this deeper end of the palette if I can. Okay, I'm going to start with R1 again, just to sort of set down everything on the lid. Like I said, I have some concealer and powder down, but just adding this as a little bit of a base to make sure everything is nice and canceled. Okay, I think I might start by going into P2. I think this will be also a really nice transition shade for me going into this palette as well. I do think this palette is, of course, a color story I personally will use and reach for a ton. This is just a very easy, very wearable palette. It's a gorgeous neutral, but I love that I have my different range of undertones in here. I can get those soft looks. We will definitely be able to create something pretty deep as well, and I think that's beautiful. And of course, Natasha does have my absolute favorite eyeshadow formula on the market. I mean, right up there competing with her is Viseart and YSL. I would say they are very, very close second place finishers, but she does still have my favorite formula. From there, I'm going to go into W1. This is one of the slip cream mattes, and using this to start deepening the outer corner. I am going to take this one up in the crease a little bit because, like I said, I do want this eye to be a little bit darker. And once again, these shades are just blending so effortlessly. There is very, very little work from me to make these looks complete. Okay, I want to go into W2. These shades look quite similar in the pan, but W2 definitely does give us a little bit more depth. It is also a slip cream. I noticed in the softer palette, the deepest shades are all in that slip cream formula. Okay, I'm going to follow my line and I'm going to go into W3, and I want to start adding this one on the outer corner, but I want to keep it very close to the lash line. I'm just switching brushes because that brush was actually a little bit more fluffy than I was thinking. So I'm just sort of packing this closer to the lash line and sort of flicking it out a little bit toward the edge so that I get a little bit of an angle, a little bit of a shape. And I'm using a very, very light pressure to do that. So I'm getting a very, very natural sort of flick. And then kind of using the excess to carve out that outer V a little bit. I think I want to go in to N1. And I want to start adding this one to sort of the middle to outer portion of the lid, adding in a little bit of sparkle This shade doesn't have nearly as much shimmer as I kind of suspected it did. All right, this shade has a little bit of shimmer to it, but nothing crazy. I feel like I could have probably skipped the shade I did closer to the lash line because the shades are honestly very similar. But now I do have a very deep kind of smoky base. I'm gonna go in to the black in the palette with my little liner brush. I'm not done with the lid, but I don't want to mess it up when I go in with the black. I'm gonna do the same kind of liner situation I did with the other side. Just a very light sort of baby liner. And then I wanna go back in to this shade right here. This is C1. I kind of had a feeling I would end up going back into this shade because this is going to be a really, really pretty lid shade, especially when I want to go sort of deep and dark and smoky, but I don't like super deep shades all over the lid. I could even sort of use this one as part of a halo eye. That would have been really pretty too. I'll have to keep that in mind for another look I create with this palette. Okay, so I ended up creating some very, very similar looks. This one, of course, I went a lot deeper, especially on that outer portion of the lid. This one is a lot lighter and softer, but as you can see, we can definitely get some depth from this palette. You can definitely go very deep and smoky with this. You could easily take this palette from daytime to nighttime if that's what you want to do, but let me pop on some mascara and then I'll come back and we can get into the dramatic palette. All right, so here is the finished look number 2 with the soft palette. Both very pretty, both looks that I would create anytime. So I am very happy with these. I mean, looking at this palette, I know right away that these are shades that I can and will get a lot of use out of. This is just kind of a perfect color story. For me, as a neutral lover, it's perfect. I love this softer, more bridal leaning look, but I also love me a good neutral brown. I think they both turned out really, really well. And I love that this palette is very well balanced. You have these softer tones, but you can take it very deep and dramatic if you want to. So I do think this is very well balanced, but let me take these 2 looks off. I'm going to preserve the mascara, of course, and then we can get into 2 looks with the dramatic palette. All right, so I'm just deciding what exactly I want to do with this deeper palette. I do think this is super beautiful, but I think I might start with Y1. I think I might just go in really lightly with this one. I did reset my eyes with some concealer and powder. I'm just blending this one into the crease. It does look quite yellowy, but I think as a crease shade for me, this might work really, really well. I was kind of debating if I want to do a halo eye, but I really just want to play with these shades and kind of get a feel for them. Okay, this shade ends up looking really yellow in the pan, but on me, it's a perfect crease shade. Okay, next I want to go in to P1, and this is kind of an example of where you can follow the columns or you can just follow your heart. So I guess that's kind of what I'm doing here. And I'm just sort of blending this one, packing it on the outer corner, but I am going to blend it up into the crease as well. I am particularly excited about this palette because we do have the sparkling foiled formula in here, which is my favorite shimmer formula from Natasha. I just find it so incredibly sparkly and beautiful. And I love that we get a whole row of shimmers. They're not all sparkling foiled, but I love that we get a whole row of those. I think I want to go in to W3 next. One thing I noticed, W1 and W3 look very, very similar on me when I swatched them out. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was kind of thinking maybe there could have been something else, but that's just me. I do think a lot of the mattes in this palette do end up looking kind of similar, to be honest. I'm almost kind of wondering if this is sort of like a bronze palette situation where we're not getting a lot of variation in terms of the looks with this one. So again, just sort of working this one more toward that outer corner, just kind of adding that depth. I think I want to go in to W2. This is a sparkling foiled, so I want to go into this one with a finger and start adding this one to the lid. That is really, really pretty. That is super pretty, and that is exactly what I love about the sparkling foiled, is that they really are just metallic shades, but they give so much shine and sparkle, and they're just so, so pretty. I just want to take a flat brush and I want to go into N2 right here to add some extra depth to that outer corner, and also to help mesh that shimmer shade. So that looks pretty. I could have left it as it was without that sort of deeper shimmer on the outer corner, and I think that would have been perfectly pretty as well. But I did kind of want to add that deeper shade to show you just how easy it is to just add that extra level of depth, that extra level of drama, and it's still not too much. I would also go in to C3 and just add a little bit of a liner. Okay, I just want to take a little bit of Y2. This one's just a little bit brighter, so I'm wondering if this will be a pretty inner corner shade. Yeah, I think that's really, really pretty for the inner corner as well. So again, just a very pretty neutral kind of look, but definitely packing a lot more depth and dimension than we got from the other palette. All right, so we have the finished look number 1 with the Dramatic palette, and I think it's very pretty. It's very warm and toasty, very fall-esque. We love it. It's really pretty. But I've been sitting here longer than I'd like to admit, looking at this palette, trying to figure out exactly what to do next. I thought about doing a halo eye, but then I was just kind of thinking, I feel like I need to use C2 because this one is kind of unique. But I know I'm not going to love that all over the lid. But I'm going to start with R1 because I do want to play with these reddish tones a little bit more. This palette kind of reminds me a little bit of the bronze palette, just in the sense of I don't think we're going to get a ton of variation in the looks that can be created with this palette, just because I think you're always going to end up with, you know, a warm brown, smokier look. You can get something a little bit softer, but if you're looking for a softer look, the softer palette's obviously going to be the option. I am so excited to see the Dramatic palette on those with deeper skin tones who this palette was created for, because some of these shades are going to look so incredible. All right, going into R3, I will say she did not skimp on her formula with these palettes. These are all just incredibly easy to work with and blend. They're very, very effortless to apply. So you can see this look does have quite a bit more of a reddish tone to it. I do think it's quite pretty. And then I'm going to take the shade R2 and I'll start adding this one toward the outer half of the lid. This is a standard metallic from Natasha, so it's not the most sparkly. It has a nice amount of shine and pigment to it, but it's not going to be nearly as intense as the sparkling foiled shades. And then I'm going to go in to P2. This is a sparkling foiled, and I want to take this one all over the lid. So this one definitely has a peachier element to it than the shade I used all over my lid on the other side. However, it's a little bit deeper, but not by much. I think that shade meshes very, very well with that red. Now I am going to do the same thing with the liner. I'm going to take the shade C3 and I'm going to add this to the lash line. And then from there, I'm going to go in to C2 and I'm going to see about adding this one on top of that black. All right, so I don't think that actually did much. I guess if you look closely, you can kind of see a little bit of the sparkle in that black, but it's nothing crazy, but that's kind of the only way I foresee myself using that black. But I do think it adds a little bit of interest, at least to me when I'm looking at it. So I don't mind that it is kind of subtle, but I do like the way this look came out also. It does look quite a bit warmer and toastier than the other side. I think when it comes to this palette in particular, my looks are always going to look pretty similar, but I'm okay with that. I kind of knew to expect that. So let me zoom you out and then we can get into these comparisons. Okay, so before getting into my final thoughts, let's get into some comparisons. So first we'll talk about the soft palette. Now, like I mentioned, I do have some overlap in the palettes that I'm comparing between both, so you will see some of the comparison palettes pop up twice, but this palette is the perfect mix of everyday neutrals. We get these beautiful browns, some softer pink shades, we get some blacks. I love that you can take it from day to night. I love that you can still go dramatic with this. I love the concept that she used with these palettes matching with her shade ranges of her foundation and concealers. I love that it's got all these different undertones. I think it's brilliant. The concept here is truly so well done. But we do have to look at some other palettes as well. So the first palette that really came to mind for me is the I Need a Nude, because I Need a Nude is easily one of my absolute favorite Natasha palettes. You can probably tell it's a little bit beat up and used. She's very well loved. This is also a palette that is very, very soft. It's definitely catering to those of us who are a little bit more fair, who love those very soft looks. But popping up the swatches, I really didn't find a lot of similarities. I was thinking that I would have more similarities than I did, because the I Need a Nude also goes into some of those pinky nudes. We have some cooler tone browns, but also this palette in general leans a little bit more cool toned, whereas the soft palette kind of has a mix of warms and neutrals and kind of everything in between. So these weren't as similar as I thought. And of course, the I Need a Nude is also quite shimmer heavy. I also, of course, had to compare it to the Biba palette. Now, the Biba palette is in one of her full-size palettes, and she really doesn't seem to come out with this size of palette anymore. I feel like they're always in the middies, or now, I guess, the midi plus, which I kind of like, because the soft palette here has 18 shades, and it's much smaller and more compact than the giant Biba palette. But you can see we have that sort of range in here as well. We go from light to dark. We have some cool tones, some warm tones, some true neutrals. And this one is also pretty light on the shimmers, but Biba actually does give us more shimmers than the soft palette. And popping up the swatches, I was definitely able to find some similarities. I don't think they're identical, but I think that they're similar enough to where if you have Biba, you could probably skip the soft palette. However, the soft palette does have that new super creamy matte and the slip cream, so depending on what you're going for, but I do appreciate that the Biba does give us more shimmers, even though it is also light on shimmers. I did do a brief comparison to the I Need a Warm palette. Now, of course, the I Need a Warm palette I think runs a little bit deep as well, and this one is also quite shimmer heavy, especially in comparison. Holding them up side by side, I don't really see much of the similarities, but I did want to show you some of the swatches because some of the browns are overlapping. But like I mentioned earlier, two of the shades from the I Need a Warm are actually in the Dramatic palette, so we will talk about that. So there wasn't as much similarity here either. Now, a palette in my collection that is not from Natasha Denona but did offer a lot of similarities is actually the Sigma Spectrum palette. Now, the Spectrum palette has been such a go-to of mine since I first got this one, because this is another one that has this gorgeous range of light browns, some rosier shades, and then we get some cooler and warmer browns. We get a lot of really beautiful neutrals. Of course, we don't get any blacks in the Sigma Spectrum, but I love that each column additionally also has the perfect shimmer for it. And also, I love that Sigma also kind of worked in columns with this palette as well. And, you know, seeing them side by side, you can kind of see those similarities there. And popping up the swatches, I was able to get a lot of really similar shades. So in the Sigma palette, you do get quite a bit more. And in terms of formula, the Sigma formula is fantastic. It is also one of my favorite formulas. I know Natasha, I've loved her formula for longer. I think I still prefer her formula, but it's not far ahead because the Sigma formula really is fantastic as well. And in keeping with the all matte palette comparisons. I pulled out the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes, the neutrals. I don't have the original Master Mattes palette, the one that's a little bit warmer, but this one I actually really do like. I think this is a great formula as well. This one doesn't have any of those pink or rosy tones, and of course you get a lot less shades, but a lot of the browns are quite similar, and you do of course get a black as well. Popping up the swatches, the Makeup by Mario palette is one that has never swatched well. I don't know why, but it does perform incredibly well on the eyes. Of course, there isn't as much overlap, but some of the shades are pretty similar. And finally, the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3 palette. This is his all matte palette. I do love his matte formula. These are all powder shades except for the two creams on the end, but they're so incredibly creamy, buttery, easy to blend. There's this perfect range of mattes. You have cooler tone mattes and you have warmer tones at the top. You know, side by side, the Patrick Ta does seem to run a little bit deeper, but it's essentially a condensed version of the soft palette. So popping up those swatches, I think you can see where I was going with that. It really is just sort of a condensed version of this, and I think the Patrick Ta palette is fantastic. It doesn't have any of those sort of pinky rosy tone mattes, so if that's important to you, that might be something to consider, but I do really like this overall. But if you do have a lot of all matte palettes, a lot of all matte neutral palettes, you're probably going to have a color story like this, and especially the Sigma Spectrum, because that sort of tries to cover a lot of these color ranges as well. Now, the Dramatic palette, I really like the Dramatic palette because you get the 2 rows of mattes and then you get an entire row of shimmers. And like I mentioned, I am a huge shimmer girl. I do love some good shimmers. This is a really beautiful neutral brown palette. I think I am going to get a lot of use out of this one as well, but I will say it's not unique in my collection by any means. So getting into the comparisons, the first one I actually pulled is actually a very affordable palette. This is from ColourPop, and this is the Not a Box of Chocolates palette. So side by side, I think it's pretty clear where we're going. We have some deep dark brown, some really rich tones. We have some sort of more reddish tone browns in here as well. We have a couple of lighter shades, but overall there's a very similar concept going on here. And popping up the swatches, I was able to get very close. So I do think if you have the Not a Box of Chocolates palette, you're going to be able to create some very similar looks, because the shades I wasn't able to really match with, I don't think it would be a really big deal. I think you're going to be able to create some very similar looks. I did pull out the original Patrick Ta, his very first one. I have to be careful the way I hold this one because the shade is loose. And again, I think you can see a lot of the similarities. Those warm browns, the warm brown shimmers, popping up the swatches, again, very similar shades. I think the Patrick Ta has some lighter shade options, so if you are a lighter skin tone and you like these tones, the Patrick Ta is a good one, but I don't think it's my favorite palette that I have from him. I did, once again, bring out the Sigma Spectrum palette for this one because the Sigma does give us some deeper shades and a whole row of shimmers as well. And popping up the swatches, again, I had quite a few similarities. I really think the Sigma Spectrum is kind of that perfect condensed version of these two palettes put together. The two Natasha Denona palettes, if you were to put them together, take the best of each one, you would end up with the Sigma Spectrum. So I just kind of want to mention that if you're really wanting both of these color stories because you think they're both really pretty and you can't decide, but you really want to get a new neutral palette, consider the Sigma Spectrum because this is going to take the best of both and put them together. Okay, I did get distracted. Who came to visit? Yes. This is Kyle. You want to say hi? Yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, I think the Sigma Spectrum is a great palette to sort of combine the best of both of these palettes, and then you're kind of getting the best of everything, and then you're not spending $82 a piece. Just something to keep in mind and consider. Now, like I mentioned, I did pull out the I Need a Warm palette to compare this one to, because of course we have a lot of these warm brown tones. So like I mentioned, the shade Pep is in the Dramatic palette and so is the shade Fervor. So those are already in here. Now, once again, popping up those swatches, I feel like the I Need a Warm definitely has some similarities. Of course, there are some shades that are identical, but the I Need a Warm doesn't have those super dark smoky tones that we do get from the Dramatic palette, so we don't have any of these black tones or any of these super deep tones. And it is, of course, even more shimmer heavy. Next, I had to compare to the Biba palette. Now, of course, the Biba palette doesn't have as many shimmers as the Dramatic palette, but there's a lot of shade similarities here. Of course, the Biba also gives us those warm tones, some of those cooler tones, some of those deep dark browns, and some true neutrals. And popping up the swatches, I got very, very close in terms of similarities. So I do think if you already have the original Biba, you could probably skip the Dramatic palette if you wanted to. And the last palette I wanted to compare the Dramatic palette to is the Bronze palette. Now this one is one of the older palettes I have from her. You can tell it was also very, very well loved. And popping them up side by side, I mean, you can tell the Bronze is very intensely warm, very, very bronze. And popping up the swatches, you can really see side by side the Bronze carries a lot more of those reddish tones. I think if we expanded on this reddish row, we would essentially have the Bronze palette. So they weren't as similar as I kind of thought, but they were in a way because the Bronze palette gave us a lot of these warm browns while also taking us in this deep black shimmery sort of category. So overall, I definitely have a lot of palettes that can compare to these that I can definitely work with to create some very similar looks, and I stand by my suggestion that the Spectrum palette is really just a mix of the best of both palettes. So I do think this is a good option. Maybe you have this one, you could skip these two, or if you're wanting both of these and can't decide, maybe go for this one because it's great. The Spectrum, like I mentioned, has lived on my desk since I got it. So overall, I think the Soft palette is beautiful. It is definitely a really great mix of shades for me. I love that you can go softer. I love that you can go deeper and more dramatic. I wish there was more shimmers. I just think it just adds so much to the palette if I had more shimmery options, but I do love the mattes that I get in here. The formulas are fantastic. They're so, so good. Do I need this color story? No. I definitely have this color story enough times in enough palettes that I could always create something very, very similar. But I do still think it's a really pretty palette overall. I am glad I have it and the formula is fantastic, but I don't think it's going to be a need. I think it's a really nice staple. I think if you love this color story, you might love this palette. I think if you wanted this one, you're not going to be disappointed in the quality. I think if you're a bridal makeup artist, this could be fantastic. But just keep in mind that you definitely probably have a lot of these tones already, and I wish there were more shimmers in here. I do love the new 18 pan Midi Plus format. I do love it. I do think it's very, very sleek and pretty. In terms of the Dramatic palette, I love that we have this whole row of neutrals here. I think she did a really great job with this color story. I love that she came up with a concept that is more geared toward deeper skin tones. I love that concept so much. So I think she did a great job with that. The only thing I would say is that for me, I feel like the looks are always going to come out relatively similar. But overall, I do think this is pretty, and I think at the end of the day, when I want to get a little bit more creative, I think what I'm going to end up doing is pairing these together, which brings me back to my Spectrum palette because I could just use that instead. But I do love these formulas in here. So I think if you have one or the other, you'll be happy. You just need to pick. Maybe depending on your skin tone or your own personal preferences, maybe you're fair and you love dramatic looks, then the Dramatic palette is the way to go for sure. So for me, I can see myself reaching for the Soft palette the most, but reaching into the Dramatic palette for the shimmers. And that's kind of how I foresee myself using these, but I do think they're really beautiful palettes. I have no regrets myself purchasing them, but I don't think they're needs in your collection. But if you want them, you won't be disappointed in the quality. But that is it for me today. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Are you shopping this launch? Are you skipping this one? just let me know all of your thoughts. I love hearing from you guys so much. And if you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.